Chances are you've heard about the bus rapid transit of Mexico, the gondolas of Bolivia, or the gondolas of Colombia. But I'm guessing you haven't heard about the urbanism transformations that are happening quietly by bus in Ecuador. Ecuador is a small country in South America sandwiched between two bigger and more well-known ones, Peru and Colombia. And today we're going to be talking about the urbanism of Ecuador, as it's not covered as much as the other two. Today's urbanism talk will start in what is surprising to many people the biggest city of Ecuador. That city is Guayaquil. No, it's not Quito, that's just the capital. And we'll start off with their exceptional BRT system. A BRT is basically a bus that's given a dedicated lane and usually off-board fare payment. It's often considered not as good as trains, and there's an easy reason to see why, as they just can't have as much capacity, but in some cases they're great. And Ecuador has kind of mastered them. The Metrovia is kind of the backbone of the Guayaquil public transportation network. And this is a map of it, along with some other lines that are buses, some upgraded, some just regular city buses. And since this is South America and it's a slightly hilly city, you better believe there's some gondolas. And since Metrovia is already taken, you better believe the gondola system is called the Aerovia. Please comment down below whether I should be calling these gondolas or cable cars. I'm not really positive, and I haven't found much consensus online. But between the Aerovia and the Metrovia, Guayaquil already has a better transportation system than many U.S. cities that are significantly bigger than it. Despite its lack of a metro, what's happening in Guayaquil is nothing short of transformation, especially when there's been really clogged up roads that are just not pleasant to be on, which have now turned into places that people can actually live and enjoy. The second city of Ecuador and the capital is more known than Guayaquil. It's Quito. And if Guayaquil is a hilly city, Quito is an extremely hilly city. And they've come up with interesting ways of dealing with that. Let's get into it. Buses are able to serve some level of hilliness, but some roads in Quito are just too much for a bus to go on. So then there's the metro. But even this only goes in some parts of the city where it's considered financially viable to build it, and this is usually the more expensive neighborhoods down near the city center. So it runs into the same problem. So what is Quito's solution? It's to put wires on the buses. Yeah, it's a trolley bus. Yet in America, it's a rare thing to see. So let's dive into the 4 types of buses Quito has, specifically focusing on the trolley bus, because that's what's cool and will give this video attention. The trolley buses of Quito dominate in places where it's hilly, also known as the whole city except for core downtown. So it's by far probably the most practical mode of transportation for day-to-day bus use in Quito. But if you don't happen to be in a hillier district of Quito and are in an area that's served, the Escovia is probably the best bus, as it's a BRT and it really serves all the neighborhoods that you need to go as a tourist in the core downtown area. So the Escovia is good, but its limited scope makes it not the best type of bus in Quito. That's probably the Metrobus Q. Most major hub connecting routes, such as employment to transit centers to houses, is done by the Metrobus Q. The Metrobus runs throughout the city and has most of the lines that the city needs daily to function covered. But there's still a few extra spaces left for feeder buses to serve. These buses can patch together areas in the city that have never had transit before or are looking to get transit, but it's less viable to have a major bus route running through. So Quito ends up with a relatively respectable public transit system. Some may say even more than Guayaquil. But what about a smaller Ecuadorian city with less money and government funds going into building transit? Well, that is the case in Santo Domingo and Manta. And today we're going to be looking at those cities and seeing what they do right and what they do wrong themselves. I will get to Cuenca later in this video. Don't worry about it. Also, apologies for the bad camera quality. That's just what they use to cover Santo Domingo in. And I've been using only Google Street View for this, so anyway, on with the video. Santo Domingo is a smaller Ecuadorian city, I believe the fourth biggest, and it's hemmed in by mountains, which makes them part of its identity. In Santo Domingo, like a bunch of other Ecuadorian cities, you can see some hints of bike lanes coming in and good development trends happening on the whole. Although there is still quite a bit happening in Santo Domingo, you can see that it doesn't get as much investment, along with Menta and Cuenca, as Guayaquil and Quito do, considering they're significantly bigger and they are where the government buildings are headed. And income disparity is shown. There's quite a few richer neighborhoods, but there's also quite a few poorer neighborhoods. And the bus service is not exactly equal. Some neighborhoods get significantly more than others. But at least there is buses, and they are relatively good. And that is something that can't be said for a lot of second cities and third cities in some countries. And they are good buses. They're new, and they work on time generally. And in Santo Domingo, you can see the contrast of some places in Ecuador. There's good neighborhoods which get a lot of attention, there's small towns which get less, and then there's poor neighborhoods which get sidelined from a lot of infrastructure investments. But it's not all bad or good. There's a lot to be learned from just looking at a place and seeing what they're doing well and seeing what they're doing badly. Ecuador does very well on buses, so let's see what's happening in Manta, shall we? Manta's seafront location gives it an air of affluence, as there's tourism and ocean-based resources such as fishing prevalent there. That makes a city which has a lot more money, but does that make a city with a lot more transit? Apparently not, as it's similar to Santo Domingo and a lot of cities in countries all around South America. It just has a bunch of buses and not really much else. So let's move on to the only city in Ecuador with a real tram, Cuenca. The Tranvía de Cuenca is worth talking about for one reason alone, that it was built fast and cheap. It wasn't stuck in what many call a boondoggle like cough cough Quebec City cough cough is, and it's actually really functional to those who live there, unlike some systems. It's kind of the Waterloo Ion of South America. It just works without too much flashiness, and it doesn't get enough media press. Cuenca has also got colectivos and buses like most other cities in Ecuador. And that's good because this is a bus video. But the Tranvía really is the new jewel of transportation there, with trains built by Ion, modern stations, and a relatively good system for a country that people don't think about often. It's definitely worth looking into a little bit. And urban design beyond the Tranvía and connected to the Tranvía is not bad either. There's quite a few bike lanes and sidewalks popping up all around Cuenca, and the old architecture is not bad either, as some of an architecture nerd myself. Ultimately, Cuenca is a great example of a small city upgraded on a similarly small budget, done very well. Ultimately, through all my ramblings, I hope you've understood how Ecuador is really a great example of upgrading cities without spending too much or without exerting too much effort. Improvements don't always have to be flashy, but this shows how improvements can really help benefit the population living in a place. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little something that you didn't know before about the country of Ecuador, and here's another video of mine to watch.